The Hunger Games prequel, or also known by its much longer title, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And coincidentally, the runtime reflects the length of the title too. IMDb's blur is pretty bare bones. It literally just says, Coriolanus Snow mentors and develops feelings for a female District 12 tribute during the 10th Hunger Games. What an essay, I know. And I guess it's true? Yeah, essentially it's a 60+ year prequel in which we learn how President Snow becomes President Snow. I can't say I'm a huge Hunger Games fan. 1 is good, 2 is fine, 3 and 4 just get worse and worse. Didn't really have huge hopes for this one, but it does do a decent amount of things right. It is, however, a 3-hour film. Way too long for the story it wants to tell. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of God, that's just way too long. That'll do, I guess. It's structured into 3 acts to a pretty heavy degree, to a point where it labels each of these segments in the film. And straight off the bat, just not a good idea here, because we got to the end of the very climactic part, near the end of Act 2, was thinking to myself, God, that was intense, had a fun time with this actually, and then boom, Act 3 title. And I just immediately thought to myself, shit, I've got a whole other third of this film to go. And it's also where I had a lot of troubles in terms of character and story too. Starting off with what worked, oddly enough, the sets really impressed me. It all feels like it was filmed on locations and on intricately designed sets, and doesn't feel overly green screened or shooed into a volume stage. It's 60 years in the past, and the design of the world is reflecting that too. The older technology is very reminiscent to those steampunk designs, and it's everywhere in this film. The Hunger Games themselves are also in a fledgling state in this period of time, so seeing it so bare bones and amateurish compared to how we see it in the OG films is really interesting. The game segment 2 is also pretty great, with some brutal moments shown in the build-up and during the games. I also enjoyed the premise behind the fact that they don't know how to make these games interesting for an audience. But in comparison, then the so-called brilliance of Snow is that he suggests to make it personal and to get to know the contendants, like no one else ever really thought of that. Speaking of Snow, he's played by Blyth, and he's really great in here, except from I just don't buy that he's Snow. It's hard to make a lead character when you know he's going to become the biggest douche in the world, obviously Star Wars being an exception, but they make Snow here young, naive, compassionate, but also very clever, and it takes some very small hits to make him drastically heel turn into the villain we come to know. He basically has a few bad days and boom, sociopath. I'm also confused regarding something he plans and executes and then seems to be weirdly shocked and heartbroken once he sees it happening, almost as if he didn't plan it. It was very weird. Snow is chosen to mentor a District 12 female choice, Lucy Gray, who is played by Rachel Zegler. God, she's having a pretty big start to her career. Again, the character is good, but the third act drastically shifts the character and their pair up into a whole new direction. And it not only feels jarring and confusing, but they didn't really put that much effort into showing how the discourse comes to be. I don't really want to spoil the film, but I'll touch on some lighter details. Nothing that won't be obvious, but something involving guns in a forest, wildly left field. I was honestly scratching my head thinking why they were just suddenly acting like that. I feel they wanted to explore the possibility of Lucy Gray being something mysterious and untrustworthy. Maybe she was using Snow for her own gains, maybe she was putting on her feelings to manipulate him, but it completely misses the mark in exploring that. And I think that would have really helped to shape Snow's heel turn better. It's a shame because the chemistry between the two of them is really strong, and I feel time should have been more focused on them and less on the weird school politic bits at the start. There's also a lot of singing moments in here, and I guess if you've seen West Side Story, it's not a surprise, but Rachel Zegler's voice is fantastic. And whilst there's maybe just a few too many singing moments in here, it mostly is played very well into the story and emotions. Viola Davis is in here as well, and she's the game designer and is comically evil, but it works for the most part. That's really kind of all I wanted to talk about. Honestly, what impressed me the most here was just the initial character chemistry between our main two leads, and also the in-depth world building they were setting up here. The pros unfortunately become problems though, because then that character pairing becomes very confusing in Act 3, and the world building contributes to this film being at least 30 minutes longer than it probably needed to be. So this film's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you're a fan of the Hunger Games, I think you'll get a lot out of this, and so I'd still recommend it, but if they've never been your thing, this honestly won't change your mind. It probably sits below the first 2 Hunger Games and above the weird 2-part one and right at the end. Right, so that's the prequel Hunger Games. Hunger Games 0? Literally a new title, please. It came out last weekend, so maybe you've already seen it. If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to, like and subscribe, all that stuff. And as always, stay tuned for more reviews on movies, anime, and video games. Until next one, guys, take care. Bye bye.